What is the canon in literature? Hello once again, my name's Justin Phoenician, and I'll be explaining the literary canon. So let's just jump straight into it. First things first, we've got to talk about the origins of the term, right? What is canon? What does that mean? It comes from the Greek canon, spelled differently, but anyway, which refers to a rod or rule of measurement. Now that's a very important thing to keep in mind. It is about measurement. The canon is some kind of measurement of something. Now originally, and actually it is still used in this sense, but the term has broadened, it was originally used to refer to authentic and authoritative religious texts. What is meant by this is basically that there are certain books, say for instance, let's take the Bible. There are certain books in the Bible that are considered to be less authoritative than others. And some types of Bibles, some denominations will exclude certain things, such as the Apocrypha. That is something that is very, very commonly excluded, and so that by some people is not considered to be canonical, but by others it is considered to be canonical. However, the term was later extended to refer to other writings, literary works, art, all sorts of things, right? Lots of things are now fall under this concept of the canon. Okay, so let's continue with what's actually in the canon. What is in the canon? So the canon, right, is the things that are considered to be authoritative within a specific, field. For instance, there are canons for every single art forms, for literature, for paintings, etc. These are basically considered to be the artworks within a specific art form, like say literature, and it's a list of the ones within that art form that are considered to be of the highest aesthetic merit. Now, the concept there of that little word there, considered, is a very, very important term to use when it comes to the canon, because these are not works that are the ones with the highest aesthetic merit. Basically, it's not saying that these are the books that are the best. It is saying that these are the books that are considered to be the best by certain people, especially experts. And I've done a video already about this, about who gets to choose what is considered to be good literature. But this is basically the follow-up to that, where it's sort of saying these are the people who have decided that they believe that these particular things, say these specific books or these specific paintings, these specific whatevers, they are the best. And therefore, they get to reside within this category of the canon, the literary canon. The basic idea of the literary canon, or of any canon, but we're talking about literary because this is literary theory explained. The idea is to have a list of artworks that represent the highest aesthetic achievements of humanity. So think about it as it's supposed to be a list of the best books written, the best books that have ever been written in every language. It's just the ones that are the best. However, the question is who decides on the canon, right? Which things get to be considered? So the canon is commonly a list that experts agree on, basically. Now, we've spoken about this before in a previous video, what people classify as an expert, but essentially it's the people who know the most, or are said to know the most, who agree, at least in a common sense way, like a bunch of them agree with each other that this book deserves to be considered to be one of the best. That is how it goes. So the problem obviously is who gets to decide about this is up for debate, right? Yes, we spoke about experts, right? Experts, people who know the most, but experts are also just humans who know the most in a specific field, in a specific area. This is why the literary canon is often described as elitist and exclusive, discriminatory and Eurocentric, and also straight male dominated. So let's talk about each of those briefly. So elitist and exclusive. The reason for this is because a lot of things that are considered to be very, very good works of literature are also the very, very stuffy, the high art ones, the ones that are about sophisticated people doing sophisticated things, which can be obviously very elitist. It will often be about wealthy people, or it'll be written in a high level of language. Maybe it won't really feature things like, say, slang, which also makes it very exclusive. It's essentially keeping out the poor people. That's kind of what happens, and that's a problem. Obviously, it's a big problem. It is also discriminatory and Eurocentric. Now, when we talk about the canon, this is a very much a Western thing, at least in terms of literary theory, or at least it's how, we were taught this. People who grew up in a more westernized education system. I'm from South Africa. We are taught in a more Western way. And a lot of the pieces of literature that you look at are white, European, or American pieces of literature. And while we might not be given explicitly racist texts, for instance, certain people are excluded. And if people are excluded, who it just happens to be people who, aren't of other races, that is discriminatory, obviously. And also, of course, it is straight male dominated. Straight stories, so heterosexual people and men, dominate the canon. There are a handful. When you think of the literary canon, you usually only there's, for every 10, 20 women, 10, 20 men, there'll be one woman, That's how it often goes, which is not good, obviously. It is excluding women, and then it'll also be excluding people who are not heterosexual. These are things you can very much criticize about the canon. And so the canon isn't some perfect list of things that are definitely the best. It is a bunch of people who have a high enough education to be able to claim what is considered to be the best. And then they get to choose, and people are taught this, because then it ends up going to schools and stuff, and you're taught that these things are the best. And that is problematic, because it excludes a lot of other things. So, while we know it's exclusionary and everything like that, what is actually the point of it? What is the purpose of the canon? Is it just basically a discriminatory thing? Well, no, that's not. While it has a function of being discriminatory, that's not really supposed to be the purpose of it. The purpose of it is supposed to be as a means to preserve the art form, right? It's to try to preserve the best pieces of literature, for instance, when we're talking about the literary canon. So it is a way of also paying respect to high-value art. These books are the best books. They're the best, and we should treat them with reverence. We should treat them really, really well. Now, do you remember actually earlier that I said that the word canon originally comes from canonical texts in religious contexts, where it's the most important things from the Bible are the canon. Well, they kind of had an almost religious reverence for certain texts. They said these texts are the most important. The Shakespeares, the Jane Austens, right? All of these people, they are the pinnacle. They are the greatest pieces of literature. They're the highest value art. So it's a way of respecting it, but also kind of removing it from the realm of regular people in many ways. It's an elevation of the art form. Now, another thing that's very, very important that the canon does is that the canon basically, they form the norms and traditions of a medium. People start to create things based on these norms and traditions, right? When there's a specific norm and a specific tradition in novels, people will start following those things because they want to be like the greats. So it also influences people's aesthetic tastes and the creation of aesthetic texts. So people, because they are exposed to the canon, they might be more likely to consider the canon to be good. So imagine if you are only shown canonical texts like this throughout your primary and high school education, right? You're taught these things in primary school and high school. Then you might think those are definitely the most important, bestest things. Those are the best books, the bestest of the bestest. But that's not necessarily true. That's just because you've been taught that way. But then if, say, you are a writer, you might then be influenced by that exact same education and then continue to perpetuate the same kinds of things that the canon does. So it does also influence people, both in how they respond to the aesthetics and also how they, how they create it. But the final little thing I'm going to say here is that the canon does change over time. Basically, aesthetic appreciation changes. The books that were considered the most important books stop being the most important books, and we move on to something else. That is what always happens. It's a very natural thing. Things that we thought were brilliant and important, we realize 30 years later that they weren't. So, the canon changes. The canon is things that are lasting, generally. But as you said, there's all the problems. There's a lot of problems in the canon. The literary canon is not some perfect thing. It is made by people, and it is made by usually people who have high education, who are usually from a higher class, right? So it'll be upper class people who are deciding for everyone else. And that is something important to keep in mind when you think about the literary canon. So as per usual, if you have any further questions, please feel free to ask in the comments. You can ask anything. If there's something that you don't understand or something that should be explained further, happy to answer. And also, if it's like a great question, we might even make another video explaining that thing and talking about that thing, because there is so much in literary theory worth exploring and explaining, and that is what we want to do here. So that is the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please do the usuals, the liking and the commenting and the subscribing and the sharing, all that kind of stuff. There will be a lot more, so yeah, keep an eye out and see if there's anything else that you enjoy. So, goodbye.